மறக்காம சர்ப்ரைஸ் பண்ணுங்க. Thank you.
Welcome to chapter 11, which is going to be all about the technique of reciprocal thinking, which I think is actually one of the most important techniques when it comes to learning how to solve endgame studies. And this term, reciprocal thinking, this is something that I believe was originally used in the classic book Imagination in Chess by Pata Gaprindashvili. Really an amazing book for calculation for advanced players. Lots of great exercises in there and lots of great techniques when it comes to advanced thinking and advanced calculation. And this idea of reciprocal thinking is something that I think is also very, very useful when it comes to endgame studies. And basically, it's this technique of using your analysis of variations to inform your solution and to improve on the variations that you first initially come up with. I think it's best explained with an example, so we should just dive right in here. This is a classic study composed by the great Trotsky, who really had a number of amazing studies that I think can only be solved using this idea of reciprocal thinking. And if we just quickly take a look here, it's white to play and win. If you would like to try to solve it yourself, fair warning, it's a pretty tough study on its own, but I would encourage you to pause the video and think about it for a couple of minutes. And yeah, if we take a look here, well, we've got knight and bishop against the queen. So materially speaking, we're way down here as white. And the only way white can win this position is through some kind of forcing combination. Now, right away, when we take a look at the candidate moves in this position, we notice some forcing ideas that look promising. For instance, both c3 and a3 attack the queen on b4, and neither of these pawns can be taken, as this would run into some kind of knight fork, knight c4 check or knight e4 check, winning the queen in both cases. But things are not so simple, of course, because black does not have to take these pawns. And on both a3 or c3, for example, black can play the move queen takes f4. Other moves I should note are not working for black. Queen a3, queen b2, queen a5, queen b6. These all run into knight c4 check, winning the queen. And if black plays queen c5, white has knight e4 check. If black plays queen takes c3, again, knight e4 check wins the queen. So black actually only has one safe move with the queen. That is to play queen takes f4. Now, when you're solving studies, if your opponent only has one response to your move, that generally means you're kind of on the right track, because if you can just figure out this one variation and find the win, it means you've solved everything. But what to do here? How can white continue? Well, after queen takes f4, white has some checks to the king, but they don't really seem to lead to much because black's king will simply run away. But white does have this tricky move g3, kind of in the same spirit as c3, another typical attraction type tactic, hoping to lure the queen to g3. And once again, black's queen has a hard time finding a square. If queen takes g3, then there's knight e4 check. If queen e3, there's knight c4. If queen e5, there's knight c4 again. If queen g5 or queen f6, there's knight e4, winning the queen. And again, if queen f2, there's still a knight e4 check, winning the queen. But black does have one square here. Black can play the move queen to h6. And it seems like black has actually escaped all the forks, and now the queen is too far away for white to do anything. And looks like black is just winning with the queen versus two minor pieces. And so this is the analysis where you have to take it and then think, well, black's only defense here was to put the queen on h6. So this is where you return to the start of the puzzle and you try to understand, is there any way to improve on this solution? Is there any forcing move we can start with to change the dynamics of the position so that black did not have this critical move, queen to h6, in this one line, so that black did not have this defense? Well, taking a quick look around the board, we notice that we could possibly start with the move h6. And this is a pretty forcing move. White is threatening to push the pawn to h7 or play h takes g7 and promote to a new queen. That would be pretty bad for black. If white gets a new queen, it's going to be a winning position with two pieces up. And so black is kind of forced to take this one. If queen takes f4, for example, white will play h takes g7, and black's queen has no way of stopping the pawn. Or if queen d4 defending the g pawn, white will play h7, and once again, this pawn is promoting. So black is essentially forced to play g takes h6. And all of a sudden, the position has changed. If you remember the previous variation, the black queen was using this square on h6, and now this one is gone. And now it's very important to check the same solution as before and see if anything has changed here. So here again, white plays c3. All of the same knight forks in the position exist, so black has to play queen takes f4. And now white plays g3. And once again, the queen is simply trapped here, looking for a square that doesn't get forked by white's knight, but there is no such square. Black's queen is simply out of room, as there is no queen h6, and just like that, white is winning this position. The queen is just simply stuck. Knight e4 or knight c4 check is coming next to win, and it's game over. And so just like that, or queen takes g3, knight e4, just to finish it off. And just like that, white wins. And so it's only through the power of reciprocal thinking that one could have possibly come up with this move h6 in the first place. I guarantee you, if you show this position to any strong player or strong solver who hasn't solved the study before, or solved this particular study before, h6 is not going to be their first candidate move. It's only after doing the analysis and checking the most direct moves like a3 and c3 that we kind of discover the issue with the line. The queen is escaping via h6. It's only after doing that analysis that you can even come up with the idea to start with this random push in the first place. So this is something that's really, really tough, but as you solve more and more puzzles featuring this kind of thinking, where you have to almost like work your way backwards from your analysis, you'll learn to kind of pick up on these tricks, and you'll learn to actually spot these things in studies, I would say, a lot more easily. With that, let's take a look at another example. This next one is puzzle number 1 from the set of exercises. And most of the puzzles in this chapter are going to have some kind of prompt or hint telling you what you should be kind of analyzing and giving you a slight suggestion as to which direction to look at. And for this first one here, the notes say that white's idea is to play bishop to c2, where black's rook is almost short on squares here and is almost trapped, but can get out. The rook can go rook h1 and get out this way, or black could even play rook takes d5, where if white were to then go bishop to e4, pinning the rook, black just goes e6, defending the rook, and white isn't going to be winning that endgame. So white's idea is to play bishop c2, but it's not quite working. So the ask here is to try and find a way to improve on this variation. Can you come up with a way to improve on the line so that white can make this bishop c2 idea work? With that, I'll ask you to pause the video, really take your time and think about this one. This is, I think, one of the best chances to practice this kind of thinking and try to see if you can come up with a better solution for white that actually wins the game. This is white to play and win. Okay, so if you want more time, definitely pause the video. Well, it turns out white can start with the move d6. Again, a very forceful pawn advance. You're going to see a lot of these in the chapter. And at first glance, it's not clear what this advance is doing, but as we kind of analyze the variations, we will kind of see the point. Well, number one, if black takes the bishop on d3, then white is playing d takes e7, and the pawn is simply promoting. Black's rook is not in time to stop the pawn. So the bishop on d3 cannot be taken. And after e takes d6, now white plays the move bishop to c2. And all of a sudden, it's not so easy for black's rook to find a square. If black goes rook h1, then there's bishop e4 check, and the rook is lost. And if black goes rook to d5, then once again, there's bishop e4, and the rook is lost anyway. And just like that, after bishop to c2, the rook is trapped. White is winning the rook. We'll have bishop and knight against the king. Hopefully you know how to checkmate with a bishop and knight. If not, it still counts. It is a theoretically winning endgame, but I would encourage you to go ahead and learn that checkmate at some point. But yeah, this one is over for black. So once again, after this move d6, black doesn't really have a lot of options here. If the rook moves out of the way, it's hard to find a square. Rook h1, white is still playing bishop to e4. And in any case, white is threatening to both push d7 and go d takes e7 to just promote the pawn into a new queen and win that way. So black is essentially forced to take on d6, and now after bishop c2, the rook is trapped. So I would say there's actually two methods to solving a puzzle like this. The first one, like I mentioned, is this idea of reciprocal thinking. You first look at your most forcing moves, your most obvious moves, try to understand why they're not working. Or what's wrong with the solution, what the defense is, and see if you can find a way to improve on it. Here, the problem with the, let's say, most obvious move bishop to c2 was that the rook was getting out via h1 or d5. And so white needed to come up with a way of improving on this variation. When we take a look around and we look for forcing ideas, not a lot of forcing moves in the position. Eventually, we kind of only have d6 here in terms of the really forcing moves. Once we notice that d6 takes bishop c2 is a little bit different than before, this is where our calculation skills take over and we can realize that, oh, actually, the rook is trapped and white is winning. So that's one way of solving this kind of study, is using this form of reciprocal thinking to try to figure out what the idea is and how you can make it happen. The other way is more of like a brute force method, where you're just looking at all the forcing moves in the position and trying to make something work. Like I mentioned, there's not a lot of candidate moves. There's not a lot of forcing moves in the position. Like king e2 is a move, but then once again, the rook gets out, and how do we actually win there as white? And bishop e2 is a move, and bishop c2 is a move, but none of these really work. Eventually, as you exhaust the options, your brain should notice that d6 is also a forcing move. And if you can stick it out and calculate it to the end, these aren't the most difficult variations to calculate. The real trouble is just noticing the idea in the first place and then taking a look at it from there. So it's really tough stuff. This is why endgame studies are kind of notoriously difficult, because they often ask you to find very unexpected ideas. But as you'll see in the puzzles in this chapter, they all come with prompts to give you a little bit of a hint, kind of tell you what you are supposed to be analyzing or looking for, and hopefully from there you are able to work out the solution. Once again, I would encourage you to spend at least 10 up to 15 minutes per puzzle if you're not able to solve it, to really try to work it out. And then after you go through each puzzle, make sure you really review the solution and try to understand the ideas on your own. That is really crucial to this process. And by the end of the chapter, hopefully you start to feel yourself becoming a much stronger solver overall. With that, I'll wish you the best of luck, and hopefully I'll see you in the next chapter. Take care.
மறக்காம சர்ப்ரைஸ் பண்ணுங்க. Thank you.